Okay, so let's open the file we prepared. So the first thing I'm going to do is export the sketches I've done. I've placed them like this. I'm going to lower the opacity. And on a layer on top, we can start to design. I'm going to use a black line, and with the pen tool, I can go along mapping out the strokes. Before we continue, I'm going to put in the pen options that I like the thickness. I normally work with a thicker pen, and the corners and the ends have to be rounded. I can go along drawing, and remember that when I stretch my vertices, they're going to round off like this. I'm going to do the whole design with the tools that we've been looking at. We're going to be using vertices, pens, lines, geometrical shapes, the shaper tool, the blend modes, all that stuff. I'm going to stretch here at the same time as the corners so I can get that perfect semicircle. I'm not really getting the head shape I want, so I'm going to get rid of a little bit of the size on the vertices so that I can get them like a little bit wider. Whenever you want to edit a vertex, you have to get rid of it and then do it again. If you don't, it's no longer a perfect vertex and it can't be editable anymore. I'm going to move on to the neck. Whenever I can, I'm going to try and draw lines at 45 degrees. Here I'm going to add in an anchor point, and I'm going to erase this one to shorten the stroke. Now that I have it the way I like it, I'm going to move on to the face, and I'm going to start drawing the beak. Let's keep going with the top part of the eye. The pen tool and the round vertex tool don't have really much to them. In the beginning, it might be a little hard because you don't know how the rounded vertices are going to look, but then you pick it up and it's pretty easy. I always prefer this than to draw the curve straight away because it's not always going to be perfect, and if I can get all of them with a style that's not like perfect circles, it's going to look much better than if each curve is something different. What I'm drawing here are the feathers on the head. Just so the distance between them is equal, we have to align them, like we saw before, in the Align option. I'm going to distribute them to the right. So yeah, I'm just going along with the feathers right here. But of course, the vertex isn't going to be the same because it's not on the same part of the head, and it's not at the same angle. What I'm actually going to do is copy the first one and spread it out. Then we're going to distribute them as we saw before. It's a horizontal distribution to the right. All of these have to end in the same place, so the strokes end in the same place. And with the last feather, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make this ball up here a little smaller. Yeah. And in the end, it's going to look like this. The eye, as you can see, is actually a fill. It's not a stroke. Let's modify the head a little bit. And now let's look at one of the tries I did of trying to draw in the feathers on the body. I'm going to show you quickly because it's not going to be the final version, but I do like to work with different possible options, especially if I'm not sure, because when I see it done, I can go for one or the other. Of course, I'm not going to digitalize all of the ideas I get. That would be way too much time for all of my designs, because I would get a ton of options, but the ones I think are better, I might try them out. In the end, what I wanted to do here was to make some feathers that are very flat, that are framed within that wing that I have made in quite a square way. Here, to make the feather on the tail, I'm going to draw one and then I'm going to repeat it. So I can make half, I can drag this transporting it, and then with the O tool, the mirror tool, I can make the symmetry. One, and there we would have the feather done. For the little feathers around the big one, I'm going to place that little feather, that's a copy of the first one, so one here and another one here. What I want to do is make it so that the blend, we're going to get all of the feathers automatically around the big feather. This will be like the little hairs that go around the feather. I'm going to put it in green so I can differentiate it from the other shapes. So we're going to make the blend with a few more steps. I think we're good with 3. Now we're going to modify the spine. I'm going to rotate this and place it, and it should get to what we want it to. What's going wrong is that it's getting deformed by the steps in between. I'm going to try to make the tail with the tool that we get here in this panel, with the same blend tool. Can you see how we're getting like this deformed shape instead of getting the same one because of the stroke? With this tool, what I'm trying to do is tell the program that this point here is equivalent to this other point. But this isn't going well if we're being honest. I don't know why this is happening. Maybe it's like stuck or something. There's always some figures that I end up deforming. Doesn't matter how much I rotate them. It gets to a point when I'm just bending it, so I'm going to leave it like this. And then I can play with these vertices and nodes. So that we can repeat that. If we put in some more steps, we can't see that deformity so much. So we're going to leave it like this. We're going to put it back to black. And before we expand it, we're going to move this onto the other side. And then we would have our tail done. And this is what we're going to spread throughout the entire tail. We're always going to make a copy before we expand. So that way we have a copy in case we have to go back. These are some other tests that I've been doing. So here, I put in some more detail on the feather with the pen tool and the stroke tool. That's all I used. And here, I started with the blend modes. I made the different feathers that are going to be in the wing on top. As you can see, this is all done with the tools we were working with before. We can go along making different kinds of feathers so that there was a bit of variety, okay? Although we're still making a repetition in the end. I made the feathers go from smaller to larger because this gives it that correct look, as if it was a bird's wing. We're not really going to see long feathers on the bottom. So yeah. When I've got it all ready, I made a clip mask and I tried it out. After this, you can try out using the feathers below. But I'm going to tell you how I made the final version later. It's very similar. But just so you know that it's not difficult, I'm going to show you how to do it. In the beginning, I was placing by hand along the tail. Then I tried to do it with the blend modes. I didn't like how it looked. It was too thick for the tail. I just wasn't very into it. I tried then to do it in a shape that sort of wrapped around it. But yeah, I didn't really like this either. I'd like to show the whole process because there are a lot of people that ask for exactly that, the whole process. And that way we'd also have proof that this isn't, the end result. But this can still maybe tell me how to continue and make the final version. That's why I'm showing you the entire process. All in fast forward, because if not, you'd get bored. Everything I'm doing is something we've already worked on. So, in the end, I did the feathers like this. I did two. One was bigger, and the other one was smaller. And I did the blend thing. I transformed the spine into a curve. And that way, I just went along placing all of these lines of the feathers that our peacock is going to have. I made the one that's looking towards us bigger. And I made the other one a bit smaller. So the same thing here, blend mode. Choose the steps. And then with the curve tool, we can curve it. I went along making all of the feathers one by one through the wing, but all of them have the same blend mode. They're just feathers that are slightly different. Precisely because of this, we're going to move this part along and fast forward so that you can see the whole process, but so that it's not very boring. I made these feathers here smaller, and seeing as they were almost at the end of the wing, I decided to make them all the same. Because if I put in a feather that's different now, we might not be able to understand the design. And now I kind of went along making the shape of the wing. And for the top part, I wanted to try and close it so that we could see the end of the wing. So I made a clip mask, as I explained before when I was telling you about the collage. I didn't do this on the entire wing because I wanted the bottom wing to be looser, but I wanted the ones on the top to be a little tidier. Here, we're going to see how I make the body in the easiest way possible, like I've already shown you guys. Here, I'm going to do the wing again because I wasn't happy with the result. Here, we're going to move on with the body, and we're going to duplicate the wing to put it behind. For the tail, I put one of the feathers I designed on the tail, and then I showed you, and I showed you how I did it. And I tried out placing them randomly along the tail. This is just one of the versions I did, and spoiler alert, it's not the final one. The truth is, seeing as the feather is so big, I couldn't get too many in, so I had to place them a little. Well, it felt kind of forced. So I went along duplicating this and putting them along the tail. By the way, I did this with blends, okay, of course. The problem with this feather here, the one I found the most, is that seeing as I made this with the same line as I did with the rest of the body, and I had put in as much detail as with the rest of the feathers, we couldn't really see if I made it smaller or if I put 6 feathers in the tail. You just couldn't see it well. So in the end, I made the lines a little thinner, and with the blend modes, I spread them out around the curved line I made. Just so that we didn't overlap any of the feathers, I used less of them. I used less steps, And yeah, this result is something I like quite a bit more. All right, so the same thing I did on the left, I did it on the right too. I actually didn't make any new blends, I just transported the one that was on the left. It looks a little bit strange because you can see that the curve is made a little bit, weirdly. If you stretch to make the curve from just one point, in that part, you're going to have more separation points. To go into the blend modes, we just have to double click on the elements, some of the elements that are blended, and then you can edit them one by one. Here you can see what I explained before. You can see what I explained before about the nose and the separation between the objects that repeat themselves. To put the feathers in the middle, seeing as there are only two, we don't need to work on that blend. All of these tests, I got rid of them because the truth is that I like the end version a lot more. All of this, I got rid of this because I already had a copy as well. I like to have my artboard clean because, to be honest, it's something I recommend, not just because it's tidy, but because it also helps you stay clear when you're designing. You can have your sight on the design and not on the leftovers that you've made before. Here I tried to add in an eyelash that I didn't really like, but what I did do was try to add more detail to the feathers on the head. I gave it like a little ball in the middle. Because later when we add in the color, this is going to look better. I thought that this part of the neck had very little detail in comparison to the rest. I guess this is because there isn't as much detail ready to do in the neck as there is in the feather, but I wanted to put something in. In the end, I went for a kind of like collar necklace kind of thing. You'll see how it looks in the end. As you can see, we've done all of this with the pen tool, the vertices, and all the things I've been teaching you. To paint our design, we just have to create an interactive paint by pressing Ctrl Alt X. all the elements we don't want to put in this interactive paint, we just have to copy and paste them on when we're done painting. The colors that you can see here are some that I've chosen to design our peacock. Here I've tried to get rid of this part to join it to the body, just so that we could see how it would look on the design. But seeing as I didn't like it, I closed it again. I want you guys to know that in the interactive paint, we haven't included the feathers on the tail, nor the elements that already had a fill. Now we just have to grab the interactive paint tool, so this bucket we have here on the left, and go along fill in the design with the colors we want to use. Just so that we can work on it easier with these colors, what we're going to do is eliminate the color swatches we get as a default, and we're going to create a new swatch group, selecting all of them and then hitting the little file symbol we get underneath the swatch panel. Now we have all the colors on our swatch panel, and we can just click on them to use them. Black and white are also colors I'm going to be using. I'm going to make the feathers in gold so that they stand out. The feathers in the tail, I mean. And now I'm just going to go along coloring the rest of the feathers. Once we have this ready, I'm going to add in now some little details. We're just going to be adding in the final touches. We're going to put in some decoration in the neck. We're going to make the eye and this part of the feathers gold. I don't like that detail in the neck. I would like to maybe make it like a necklace. I don't know. I'm trying stuff out. But I don't know. I'm going to try and make this guy a necklace, like with a discontinued line, as if it were like made out of dots. And I'm going to make it gold, of course. Just go along trying stuff. Just take your time, and when you have it ready, we just have to make a copy, and now we're going to go to Photoshop. So see you then. Bye.